But I'm gonna tell you something that no one else will tell you. If you've seen my last video, you'll know that I made many mistakes to get to where I am today. The good news is, since I've already made them, you don't have to. If I could go back in time and talk to my younger self, these are the top things that I would tell him. The first one is big and something I don't hear people talking about enough. The person who makes the most progress in the gym is the one who can stay injury-free the longest. Each corner of the rectangle stands for a principle. The premise is, good form and technique leads to injury prevention, which leads to more time in the gym and therefore more gains. Rinse and repeat. And yes guys, you can have great form and still get injured because of other factors like poor mobility, lack of recovery, and not warming up enough. In the past, I've injured my lower back on squats and deadlifts multiple times, sometimes to the point where I couldn't walk for a day. And on one occasion, it cost me 6 months of effective training. Why? Because I was lifting heavy weights with bad form over and over again. I'll say it again guys, the person who makes the most progress in the gym is the one who can stay injury-free the longest. Learn how to track your food as early as you can. Don't be that guy. We all know who you are.
I eat so much food, bro, and I can't gain weight.
Oh yeah? How many calories do you eat in a day?
So many calories.
No you don't. The reality is, most people who think they have a fast metabolism are actually just under eating, and most people who can't lose weight are actually just eating too many calories. Sure, there are definitely exceptions, but exceptions don't disprove the rule. There are tons of apps out there to track your nutrition with. I use MyFitnessPal. In general, I aim for 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and fill in the rest of my calories with carbs and fats. I don't religiously track my carbs or fats, because my diet is usually pretty consistent, but you can if you want to. Recently I've started a mini cut and I'm dieting on 2400 calories. Here's an example of 3 consecutive days of tracking for me. As long as I hit my protein goal and my calories, my carbs and fats fall into place. I personally go with a higher carb and moderate fat approach. In terms of how many calories to eat, this differs widely from person to person. Everyone has different maintenance calorie needs. Maintenance is basically how many calories you need to maintain your current weight. In order to find your maintenance calories, I'd recommend starting off by using an online calorie calculator, like the one in the description below. These calculators aren't perfect, so use them as a guide only, and test it out for 2 weeks to find out what your maintenance calories really are. Once you find your maintenance, I usually add about 200 to 300 calories for a muscle building phase, and I usually decrease about 300 to 500 calories for a fat loss phase. You'll have to adjust your calories based on how your body and your weight responds. If you've just finished a muscle building phase and are transitioning into a fat loss phase, then I like to be a bit more conservative initially and start off by decreasing my current calories by 200 to 300. Gaining muscle is a slow process guys, so the longer you can be in a muscle building phase the better, especially in your first 1 to 3 years of training. Just don't go crazy with bulking. I'll talk about that later in the video. Tracking your calories takes some time and practice to master, but after a while you'll do it without even having to think about it. 2 of the common mistakes people make when tracking are getting confused between raw versus cooked weights of foods and not knowing what to do when eating out. Always use raw weights of foods when tracking if you can, especially if you're trying to get lean. For example, 200 grams of chicken breast might weigh anywhere from 120 to 150 grams once you cook it. So what you should be doing is entering 200 grams of chicken breast into MyFitnessPal and measuring out 120 to 150 grams for your meal. If you want to batch cook foods, then measuring out the raw and cooked weights is important. I usually have this saved on the notes section of my phone. You'll probably be able to find the calories of cooked chicken breast and other foods on MyFitnessPal, but there's a lot of inconsistency involved. If you're in a muscle building phase, it might not matter as much to you. In terms of tracking food when you eat out, this one can get tricky. Most fast food joints and certain restaurants do provide nutritional information on their websites. In those cases, you can track what you eat, but it won't be perfect. If you're eating anywhere else, which is basically all of us, then it becomes harder to track. The good news is, once you get better at tracking, you'll learn how to intuitively eat and estimate your calories better. This is why I always tell people, don't intuitively eat at first. If you haven't learned how to track calories, you can't maximize eating intuitively. Learn how to track first to build that base understanding of what's in the food you're eating. I will say this though, if you're serious about a dieting or fat loss phase, then eating out will make it much harder to stay on track. Follow a structured routine with enough rest. Guys, for the longest time, I went into the gym without a structured routine. I had so many exercises that I'd learnt, so I kind of just picked what I felt like on the day, depending on what I was training. Don't do this, guys. Having a structured routine and structured exercise selection is important. Here are some examples of how you can structure your training. Push-pull legs is probably the most common and a great way to do it. There are plenty of other options out there, but these are just some examples. In general, if you can hit your muscle groups 2 to 3 times a week, that's optimal. You'll have more opportunity to build muscle. But guys, at the end of the day, make sure to enjoy the program you're running. That's what will motivate you to keep coming back. In terms of exercise selection, stick to a few good movements that work for you. Once you find a few good movements for each body part, don't change it up too frequently. This is a big mistake. If you're always changing up your exercises, it's pretty hard to track your progress. Do 10 to 20 sets per muscle group per week, give or take. This one is big, especially when you start hitting your muscle groups multiple times a week. In general, for smaller muscle groups like biceps, triceps, or calves, I aim for about 10 sets per week. For bigger muscle groups like legs, chest, or back, I aim for about 20 sets per week. It's important to note that these 10 to 20 sets don't include warm-up sets. If you're a beginner, you might even need less than that. When you're new to training, you don't need that much volume to grow. Can you do more than 10 sets or more than 20 sets? Yeah, you can. Sometimes I do as well. It's not a hard rule. It's a guide. It comes down to recovery. But if you constantly do too much volume, after a while there's diminishing returns, and you'll find it harder to recover between sessions, especially if your intensity is high. Track your workouts and lifts. I didn't track my workouts for the longest time. There were periods where I did for a few weeks or months, but then I stopped. It wasn't until 1 year ago that I started tracking my workouts religiously. I saw a ton of progress after doing this. Tracking your lifts and ensuring you're progressively overloading over time is important. But I'm going to tell you something that no one else will tell you. Track your form and how the sets feel on your main exercises as well. Let's say I got stronger this week on bench press, but I didn't really feel it in my chest, and my form wasn't as smooth. I will track this. Looking at numbers alone doesn't tell you everything. This is something that I've been doing for a while, and it's really helped me progress on certain lifts. Beware of the B word, bulking, but it depends. We all have that one bulk that went a little too far on our lifting journey. Mine was in 2017 when I broke my arm. I ended up at a whopping 82 kilos at just under 5'7". To put that in perspective, it's 6 years later, I've built a lot more muscle and I'm currently 74 kilos. Bulking, or increasing your calories a bit more aggressively, has its place in 2 scenarios. You're a naturally very skinny guy, or you're very lean. For the rest of us, I already mentioned the term muscle building phase. You can think of this as a lean bulk. You don't have to force feed. Simply find your maintenance calories and slowly gain weight over time. The key word is slowly, especially if you've been lifting for a while. Building muscle is a slow process, so whatever weight you gain fast will most likely be water, glycogen, and fat. Be smart, be patient, make sure you're eating enough to grow, and trust the process. That's it, guys. So to summarize, stay injury-free for as long as you can. Learn how to track your food. Follow a structured routine with enough rest. Do 10 to 20 sets per muscle group per week, give or take. Track your workouts and lifts. Beware of the B word, bulking. And guys, if you found this video useful, make sure to smash that thumbs up button, and I'll see you all in the next one.